Welcome everyone to a slightly different version of Event Insights this week. Sorry about those technical delays there. I'm Chrissy, I'm head of content with Safe Events Global, and joining us today we have Corina Goetz. And Corina is going to talk to us about Vision 2030 for Saudi, as well as some other big projects over there and the changes that we can expect to see over there. Corina, we'll do a little Q&A at the end, I suppose, if you still have time. I know we're already a little off schedule. But in the meantime, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Well, nice to meet everybody, and hopefully lots more people will see this afterwards. So I am just going to share my screen now. So, well, I titled this Understanding Vision 2030 because that really is what it is pretty much about. If you have any questions, leave them in the chat, and then at the end I can come back to them and we can have a look at them. Oh, sorry, there was somebody saying something? No? Okay. So why, oh why do we need to know about Vision 2030? And I find it quite amazing that a lot of people still haven't heard about it. There's still a lot of people that deal with the Middle East or that deal with the Gulf or also specifically with Saudi, and Vision 2030 hasn't really ever appeared on their radar. Well, you know, Saudi is very quickly evolving, and it's really interesting because Saudi is also often referred to as the giant that has just woken up. So I thought that was a really nice analogy. And that really, I think, has come a lot from Vision 2030 and what they are trying to do. And before I get into this, I'll tell you a little bit about me. So I'm Corina. My background is in hospitality. I've worked with clients from the Gulf region specifically for sort of like 20 years, you know, and now I have a lot of friends out there, clients out there, and I realized very quickly that there was a need for people, for Western people and companies to understand more if they wanted to work with this market, and if they you know, if they really wanted to understand what's going on out there and what the opportunities are. Because again, I think with Vision 2030, there are a lot of opportunities that I think just a lot of people don't know about. And that's why I think I'm here to teach the Western world a little bit more, and also let people know that a lot of the things that they have known from a long time ago, they're not actually the same anymore, and things have changed quite a lot. And I think one of the most enlightening things for me was like how fast things have changed in Saudi. And even some of my Saudi friends now say, if you had told us 5 years ago that this is the situation we would have in the country now, we wouldn't have believed you. And that's exactly where Vision 2030 comes in. So originally, Vision 2030 was announced in 2016 by the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And initially, I think a lot of the West looked at this quite skeptically, and they were like, well, you know, maybe this is, you know, this is just a bit of a project that they brought in, and we don't really know what to make of it, and is it really gonna actually make a big difference? But I think, like now when we're in 2024, I think people have seen all these changes and they suddenly realize, yeah, this is actually real. And there are a lot of good opportunities. And don't get me wrong, I think there's still a lot of people that are very skeptical about the whole, you know, giga projects and what they're trying to achieve. But I think companies are starting to see the opportunities now and where they can fit in and how they can actually become part of this Vision 2030. So let's look at this a little bit more. And essentially what comes under Vision 2030 is that, you know, Saudi wants to diversify the economy, some of the social structures, and also culturally, they want to really diversify. And a lot of, I think, the goals also they come very much from that desire that they want to diversify away just from living purely out of the oil, and that they need different things for the country. And yeah, exactly what I said. So it's not to be reliant on oil production, but also I think to bring in bigger change to the country and modernize the kingdom. And I think what is really interesting to know is that in Saudi, 63% of the Saudis are actually under 30. So that's a huge number of people that are young people, and they have a lot of different needs to some of the older people. And not only that, I think also with the rise of social media, they have seen what is happening in other countries. It doesn't matter if you can't travel to another country, but thanks to social media, you can now see what's happening. Like, what are the restaurants, what is like concerts like? And it's really interesting because up until 2018, Saudi didn't even have cinemas. So it's a massive change. And it's a change that, of course, is very much welcomed by a lot of the Saudis because it really improves their life. And I think that's also one of the other things that they're trying to do with Vision 2030 is to, come up with new things for renewable energy, drive urban development. Tourism culture is a really, really big pillar. And that's even more so interesting because tourism, for example, was never really a thing. The only tourism that Saudi ever had was the religious tourism where people went for Hajj and, they went because they were Muslim and they wanted to go and see the holy sites. But tourism in the context that we know, where we would go to Paris or Rome or something, that was never really a thing. And you couldn't actually get a tourist visa prior to, I think it was probably 2017, 2018. And now the visa process is actually really easy for a lot of the nationalities. For example, the British nationalities, you can get tourist visas on arrival. So it's actually really easy. And of course, now people say, oh, well, why would we go for tourism to Saudi? And again, that comes back under that Vision 2030, where they want to re-educate and show, actually, let us show you what some of the things are that we have in this country and why you would want to come and visit us as a tourist. So, and I'll come to this in a little while because part of these giga projects are also a lot of tourist destinations, attractions, and things like that. But then also, I think it involves other things like housing, for example, and healthcare to try and, just generally make the life better for the whole of the country. And I think, that's probably a really good goal. And I think the final point is that just very recently, I think they brought in these 3 pillars for Vision 2030, that they want a vibrant society, a thriving economy, and an ambitious nation. And that's also interesting with the ambitious nation because Saudi, a lot of people used to live of oil. Maybe they didn't have to work or they worked very little because also, again, there was not as much opportunity specifically, for example, for women to work. And now that has changed a lot. And a lot of the people that I talk to, they always find it really interesting because they say, oh, but women, they have like no rights and things, and they can't really participate. And that's not actually true because you have a lot of women entrepreneurs in Saudi. And not only that, I find it really interesting because, for example, in the politics space, like the #1 diplomatic posting for any kind of country is the US. So if you are posted as an ambassador in Washington, that is like the pinnacle of your diplomatic career. And it's really interesting because Saudi's ambassador to the US is a woman, Princess Rima, and she has been in her position since 2019. So this has actually been going on for quite a while. And I think people seem to forget that. And so they have made a lot of changes and they have brought in a lot of sort of reforms and things. And that's very good. So part of Vision 2030 is the Saudi Giga projects. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard about the Saudi Giga projects. And I recently came across the statistic where it basically said they're worth approximately 884 billion US dollars. And the interesting part with this is that essentially less than 10% of contracts have been awarded for any of these projects. So there's a huge amount of potential for companies with new technologies, new products to go in and penetrate this really, really new market and help them also what they want to achieve with Vision 2030. And so I just thought I'll show you this sort of map. So this is the whole kind of map of Saudi. And I think sometimes it's just really good to look at the map because a lot of people always think, you know, it's just about Riyadh, which is just right here. But Saudi is actually a really big country. And there is a lot more to Saudi. So you have, for example, you have Tabuk up here, you have the northern borders region, you have Hale, you have Qasim, the Makkah province down to Jizan. So there is a lot more in Saudi than just Riyadh. And the projects are actually also spread across all of these different regions. And I'm going to show you this now. So this is actually a really interesting map where it shows you Saudi again as a whole. So you see Riyadh is here. And there's quite a few projects around Riyadh. But then you see you have Neom up here, which is not far from Tabuk. Then you have Amala, which is also part of the Red Sea. You have the Red Sea project, which is here. But then you also see there is other things. So for example, you have King Abdullah Economic City around here where Jeddah is. You know, you have Jizan Economic City. So there's a lot more projects going on across the whole of the country than just Riyadh. And I just felt it would be, you know, just a good way of showing everybody that it's not just all in one place. And I'll touch a little bit on a lot of the giga projects in a second. So I've picked out only a few key projects because I think if we were gonna go through everything, we would be here all day because there's literally so many. And not only that, I think they keep announcing new projects every other week. So it really pays to stay on top of everything and to stay on top of you know, of all the news because like it's not just one thing, and in a month's time like the landscape will have changed already. So I thought, because you're obviously in events, I thought Qiddiya is an interesting project for you. So Qiddiya is sort of like, I'd say about like 40 minutes sort of south of Riyadh. And the idea is to establish this as a separate city and make this a global hub of entertainment, sports, and culture. So a lot of the things that they're building there are like stadiums, you know, sports facilities. And essentially, once once we get a little bit closer to 2030 and 2034, because Saudi has also just won, or last year they won to host the World Expo. They won the World Cup. They will need all of these different sort of facilities on site. So Qiddiya is seen as like the entertainment hub. But also Qiddiya is to go back and make this as a tourist attraction, because of course, if tourists come, they may just come and want to see the country, but they may also want to go and attend some really good events. So this is also part of establishing Saudi as a tourist destination, and Qiddiya will have a very big role to play, but also to offer their own citizens new things, you know, football games, concerts, things like that that they never had before, but that a lot of the young people actually want. And it's really interesting because a lot of the Saudis used to go to Dubai because essentially there wasn't that much entertainment. And this really has done a massive shift in the last few years because now the entertainment in Saudi is almost better than the entertainment in Dubai, which is hard to believe. So this is Qiddiya, and then we will look at the next project. I'm sure all of you have heard about NEOM. So NEOM is to position Saudi to play really like a leading role in global development. So NEOM doesn't just have one function. And when we go through the projects here, you will see they are very diverse and not everything has the same sort of purpose. But NEOM is also, the idea is to make it a new model, a new hub for sustainability, because they're also trying out a lot of different new technologies out there. And I think some parts of NEOM will also be quite interesting because they will want companies to move there. I think a lot of the rules that may apply across Saudi may be very different for NEOM, just also to attract that international investment and attract these kind of different companies to come and establish like a hub or a regional headquarter in the region. And then NEOM, of course, is also there to promote a lot of technology. Interesting, a lot of people always still say to me to this day, oh, especially if they don't know a lot about the Gulf, they say, well, what is like the internet and technology is there. I'm sure they need a lot. And you will be surprised. I think Saudi actually has a lot of technology, and a lot of the Gulf countries are really like leading the world with the way they're implementing technology. So for me, one of the really interesting things was when on one of my last trips to Saudi, I actually saw some of the meeting rooms that they had at PIF, which is the Public Investment Fund. And the meeting rooms, I have never seen anything like this in Europe. Like literally, they are state of the art. They have the latest technology. They have all the latest TVs. Everything is controlled via iPads and things. It's so slick. It was beautifully done. And it gave me this really interesting thought where I thought, wow, a lot of people that work for PIF or that work for some of these companies, they come over to London, to Europe, and then they're really disappointed when they see the meeting rooms because they are not anything like what they are used to at home. And I think that has to be a massive shift in sort of like the Western mindset, because we just, or a lot of people here still think it's the opposite, that like the UK, Europe has all of the leading advanced technologies, and it's not actually the case. So it's that Saudi in particular is a lot more advanced than people think. And like I said before, NEOM also wants to become a home and a workplace for people from around the world. They want companies to move there. They want people to move there. They want business owners to move there because they just really want to become, I mean, at some point, I think it was talked about that NEOM wants to be the new kind of Silicon Valley. But that is essentially the ambition, to become a really global hub for sustainability, for technology, for all sorts of things. So it's a big vision and there is a lot to do. But under NEOM, we actually have a lot of sub-projects. I'm going to go through a few of them. I'm sure most of you have heard about the line, because I think it's been in the press a lot, and people talk about this is just really different, and is this even going to work? And, I think the building has begun. They've really started working on this, and it's just something that they want to do that is different. And I have a few more that I actually took from the NEOM website, from the website, where they put a few statistics on there, that it's going to be 170 kilometers long. It will be 500 meters above sea level, and it will be 200 meters wide. And basically, it should have very little impact on the nature. It should be something that is very sustainable, and this whole sort of like footprint of the line, or also like the emission, should be almost next to nothing. And that's I think what you will find with a lot of these projects, that they want to go the route where like a lot of people just would think, wow, I don't know if this actually is ever going to happen. But I personally believe it will happen, because I think they've made so many changes and they've come out with so many different ideas, and they have the best people, the best engineers, the best architects, the best people working on this, and it will really come to fruition. I'm very certain. So then one of the other projects for NEOM is Oxagon. And Oxagon will be the largest floating structure in the world. And it will also be sort of like a global trade route or path. It will run out of, or it will run with 100% clean energy. And again, I think Oxagon is really designed to be, driving innovation, driving technology, attracting companies to become sort of like part of a hub of companies that have really cutting edge technology. Then the next project that is also part of NEOM is Trojena. And I'm sure maybe some of you have heard about Trojena because, again, I think this is quite an interesting one because many people think Saudi is just a desert and they don't actually realize that there's also mountains, there can be snow. So Trojena aims to be the it aims to have a ski village. It will host the Winter Asian Games in 2027. It will have some really cool slopes, and they will build some very nice high-end ski resorts. And again, it goes very well with the tourism vision. With it will be an alternative place to go ski. Maybe if you don't want to go to Europe, you could go to Saudi, even though this may sound really funny. And it's just a really interesting concept, I think, with Trojena. And you, of course, also have another tourism project, which is the opposite to Trojena. So not snow, but beach and, bringing about a really nice yacht club, like where you can dock your yachts. And this is called Sindelay. And Sindelay is is this really high-end island where you're going to get beautiful villas, beautiful hotels, and people will just have another option to go to a different destination. And the funny thing is, obviously, that all these really diverse things are all in Saudi, and it will probably offer a lot of diversity for all the tourists. So here you have another picture of Sindelay. So you will see it has a yacht club, a sports club, spa and wellness, beach clubs, some retail outlets. So it's really it's really a really cool place to go and to spend your holiday. And with Saudi as well, I think, when you travel from Europe, I think we forget that Saudi is not actually that far away. It's only like a 5.5, 6 hour flight, depending where you go. So it's actually very accessible. So Sindelay will be exciting. And then they've just not very long ago announced not just one, but quite a lot of projects. And they all pretty much centered around the tourism. But they all come under the headline of the Gulf of Aqaba. And I've come up with all of them. So they all kind of have different kind of tourist attractions. So you have Leia, which is like a retreat in the mountains. Then you will have Sadun, you will have Epicon, and each of them will have sort of very, very unique, groundbreaking structure. So for example, Epicon has these sort of like two big towers that are going to be like hotels, and the whole idea of this Gulf of Aqaba project is that you bring in some new wellness destinations, some new destinations for walking, for climbing, going into the mountains. So these are pretty much all aimed at tourism. And I'm just going to show you, these are all the ones that they have announced so far. So they have Leia, Epicon, Sadun, Sena, Sirana, but it continues. They have Aqualum, they have Utamo, and there's two more. There is Elanan and Nolana. So there is a lot of projects under that sort of heading, but they all very much focused on tourism, attracting new tourists, attracting not just the average tourist that just wants to go to, like, let's say a villa and just hang out by the beach, but also have people, that will want to go to the mountains, that will look after their wellness, that may go to yoga retreats. So it's really, really interesting to look at how much they are investing into this. And not only that, also considering that that all of these destinations have never been any kind of tourist attraction ever, and they were never accessible for tourists before. So it's actually a lot of cool things coming. And I think it will really add to the Gulf. And I think what Saudi is doing as well, which I think is very nice, I think it will uplift the whole of the Gulf region. So not just Saudi. And it may also then just bring some of the other countries a bit more into focus. And people may think, you know, I will do a whole round in the Gulf and not just go to Saudi. Maybe I'll go to Saudi, maybe I'll go to Qatar, maybe I'll go to Oman. So some of the other countries I think will also benefit from these developments in Saudi. And of course, they can then also as a region bid for some of, you know, the big sporting events and some of the things where maybe you don't just need one or two locations where you want to sort of like diversify a bit. You could sort of roll that out across the region, which I think is very exciting. But of course, there's a lot more projects. So these are not the only ones. So this was just NEOM. But we also have Diriyah, and if you have ever been in Riyadh, you may have seen that. And there's a small part of Diriyah is obviously open, so you have you know the place where you enter Diriyah, where you have a lot of restaurants. There is a museum, then you can see sort of like the old palace. You can walk around, and this is quite an you know, a fundamental project for them because it's also about heritage and it's about, you know, celebrating Saudi heritage, but also showing it to the world because Diriyah is seen as the birthplace of the first Saudi state, which happened in 1727. So they go back a lot further than what they do for National Day, which only goes back to the 1930s. So it's very much also to celebrate the history and the culture and show other people, for example, the tourists that are coming in, what the culture and what the evolution of Saudi has been. And Diriyah has a huge amount that still needs to be developed. I was really amazed when I was there last time and I saw actually the amount of, or the space that they were still developing for Diriyah. Because in my mind, I thought, wow, most of it had already been finished, but no, far from it. One of the other exciting destinations that they have in Saudi, and I'm sure some of you have heard about it, or maybe some of you have already maybe worked on projects there because there's been a lot of events out in Al Ula, which is, for me, the only place I could ever compare this to is probably, and again, it's not really comparable, but it's very much what you experience if you have ever been to Petra in Jordan. That seems to be, you know, what it is. It goes back to some of the ancient civilizations, and it's just like the coolest place to I think to go to see for, I mean, of course, lots of people like to go and take Instagram pictures. It's absolutely Instagrammable, you know, but you can also learn a lot about the history, and it's been there for years. And some of my Saudi friends have said to me like 2 years ago, my God, we didn't even know this was here. And now it's open for the world, which is so exciting. So again, I think when you look at all these things that you can then do in Saudi, you can go and explore history, you can go maybe ski, you can go lay on the beach. It's actually pretty cool. So it's not just a one-trick pony, it's you have a lot of options. And then, of course, which you saw on the map as well, was the Red Sea Global. And the Red Sea project is obviously that development on the Red Sea, where again, they've never developed any hotels, any tourist spots. It's almost like it's sort of virgin islands, virgin land. And that's so exciting because especially for people when they want to go diving, because all the coral reefs are still intact. And one of the things that I really love about the Red Sea Global Project is that they really work with the nature and they very closely monitor, you know, what is happening to the animals, what is happening to the environment. And the minute they feel, or some of their statistics show that something is off in the environment, they have to go back to the drawing board and say, how can we actually develop this area without you know, without destroying nature? And I think that's so key because, you know, a lot of these destinations we want to preserve for generations to come. So sustainability is a big focus, and to make sure that the whole kind of wildlife can still exist as it does now. And another project which I thought would be interesting to pick out is the Sports Boulevard. And that is also something I think with sports that is very interesting for the golf, because a lot of the golf countries have now brought in things like sports days. They put a lot more money into education for their population, to basically say, sports is really like good for you, but not only is it good from from a health perspective, but we also want to bring in lots of events so we can inspire you and you've seen that probably with the football, because there's a lot of famous footballers now playing in Saudi, but also they're bringing in tennis, they're bringing in all sorts of things. So, and the Sports Boulevard, I think, will be a really nice place for people to go and work out, to go and walk, to go and bike. And it's something, again, that never really existed in Riyadh. And if you have been to Riyadh before, like now, Riyadh is at the moment, at least, it's not really a city for walking. It's not like in London where you can walk, or in Paris where you can walk. So I think they're creating these kind of spaces to say, but this is a place where you can go and get your coffee, you can go and work out, and it's a nice place and you're surrounded by nature. So I think it's a very good initiative. And then, if we look at tourism, you also want to bring in some more culture and some more art. And so this is why the Royal Arts Complex came up as a project. And if, for example, you look to the UAE, they have brought in a lot of museums. Like if you just look at Abu Dhabi, they have a whole island full of museums. And I think, again, Saudi never really had that a lot. So it's very key to also focus on their own artists, bring in new exhibitions, and just generally giving, I think, a more interesting vision to their own population, and especially to their younger population. So you can see that there's lots of different avenues that you can work in. You can work in tourism or in art or in anything you want. And I think that's really key here. And then, of course, events. There is so many events. And for any of you that obviously have been over there, you will have come across some really cool events. But I just wanted to pick out a few that are happening now and that are happening later on in the year. So, for example, now there's the Daria Biennale, which is like an arts festival. So they're bringing in, a lot of different artists and exhibitions, which I think is really cool. And next week, next week, you're going to have LEAP, which is this huge technology and AI conference that they have once a year, where there's a lot of people going there, bringing out really innovative new technologies. And it's become huge. The amount of people that are now going to LEAP from all around the world is absolutely crazy. But I thought I'd throw a fun one in as well, because this one is actually, I think it finishes tomorrow, called Snow Blast. And they brought in snowboarders, skiers, any kind of people, just to, come up with this festival to celebrate skiing and to celebrate snowboarding, and again, give a different angle to it. And I'm sure lots of people didn't even know that this was happening. So it's pretty cool. And then, of course, towards the end of the week, next week, and I'm also like a huge Formula One fan, hence why I know all of this, there is the Grand Prix in Jeddah. And part of the Grand Prix in Jeddah is obviously, yes, of course, there's, the F1 and there's all the racing, but it's all the stuff that's going on around it. Because every single time they had a Formula One event, they also always had concerts after that. And this year, they're going to have Alicia Keys, they're going to have Pharrell Williams. And I think it's easy to forget that Formula One has only been in Saudi this is the third year, because the very first year was 2021. And that was a big deal. And people made a big deal about it, because it really was. And it was just so exciting. And it's a really exciting circuit as well. And it's an evening race. And it's just really cool because, whether you're local or whether you're a tourist, these are really great things to be part of. And it's interesting because in 2021, when they had their first Formula One event, I actually went to Jeddah to the race, and I also went to some of the concerts afterwards. And it was so well organized. It was very controlled. I felt very safe as a woman. And it was quite funny because the people that I was with, I kind of ended up losing at the concert, but I never felt unsafe, and it felt very safe, and I felt very much taken care of. And it was really interesting because after one of the concerts, when I was trying to leave, I was waiting for my car, and obviously because the traffic was crazy and the car was miles away, so I kind of like stood there on the sidewalk waiting for my car. And there were the security of the concert, and they said, why don't you come and sit with us, and we'll look after you. And they looked after me until the car came, and it was just so nice. And it was such a nice, hospitable feeling that I haven't really had in many other places. So I think, again, it's a really big misconception that Saudi is unsafe and that some of these events are not well managed, because the ones that I experienced, at least, they were done really well. And of course, coming up, we're still in Riyadh season, but I'm sure next year is going to be even bigger and better. And judging from this year alone, which for Riyadh season, they had like a Disney castle, they had all these boxing events, it was anything you could actually think of, they had. So I'm not sure how they're going to top it next year, but I'm sure they will, because they always come up with new ideas. They had drone shows, fireworks, all sorts of things. And then, of course, I know Safe Events also works on Middle East, which happens every year in December. But there's not only Middle East, there's also Ballet Beast, which is in Jeddah. And it's really cool. Now, I think we pretty much reached, yes, the end of my presentation. So if I talk a lot about Saudi, Middle East in general, if you want to connect, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And also we do a twice monthly newsletter, and every Sunday we do a different topic for our Middle East Sunday pages on the Middle East in general. So if you're interested to just learn some more about Saudi, but not only Saudi, like Oman, UAE, Bahrain, any of these places, then just sign up to the newsletter. It's free, and we will give you tons and tons of value. And that's sort of the end of my presentation. So I haven't actually seen in the chat if there are any questions. I don't think there are,
really interesting.
But if anybody has any questions, I'm ready for questions.
Yeah, fire ahead if anyone has any questions. In the meantime, I suppose all the different projects and everything that you were talking about there, it's so interesting to see everything they have coming up to really try and push tourism. And I know, like, as well on the cultural side, they're looking at relaxing their drinking laws. I saw it's recently come out that they're giving women a lot more autonomy as to choose how they want to dress. Do you see any other changes coming up on the cultural side that they're also trying to implement to push tourism?
I think, not very long ago, I think probably a couple of weeks ago, because the alcohol question comes up time and time and time again, they introduced that I think if you're in sort of like diplomatic circles, you can buy alcohol. So I do think it will come. It will probably be in a very controlled space, like whether it be in hotels or certain areas or something. But I do but I do think it will come, because I think that's also what some of the Western tourists will expect. But that's why I think they're also looking at places like Neom, for example, as completely sort of like separate entities to the rest of Saudi. And there may be, differences in rules that you can do in Neom that you can't do in the rest of Saudi, for example. And I would imagine that will be a very similar thing for some of the other projects, to make sure they can accomplish that. And it's quite, like, for me, especially as a woman, it's quite interesting. I've never really felt unsafe. And I used to actually go to Saudi when you couldn't get a tourist visa, and when it was a real difficult thing to get a visa, because you had to get somebody to sponsor you, but also as a woman you had to like completely like you had to cover your hair, you had to like make sure like your abaya was closed up on top, and it's not like that at all anymore. And I think that's what people just don't know, because things have moved so fast and they just don't have that experience with it. They still remember what it was 10 years ago, and it's moved on really quickly, and it's actually a very kind of safe place. And I also have to say that like a lot of the Saudis are always very hospitable. They always will try and help you. They will, you know, they will really want you to see the best of their country. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, 100%. I see a couple of things coming in on the chat here. No actual questions though. But yeah, no, I have to agree. I mean, I was over there in December myself, and I found it very, very comfortable being there as a woman. I found them very hospitable, very, happy to see visitors and happy to see different cultures coming over to visit them. Yeah, it's a nice experience, all right.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't know. Anybody has any more questions? We only have a few more people here. I think some people have gone, but maybe there'll be more questions once you put it up on the YouTube, which we can have a look at answering. But I think it's definitely the place to watch and the place to be in the Middle East.
100%. Yeah, okay. So as Corina said, if there are any more questions, I mean, you've got all her details here. She's given you the link to her newsletter as well, which I'll also post along with the YouTube video on Friday. But other than that, thank you so much, Corina. That was really, really interesting.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, nice to meet you all. And yeah, let us know, connect with me and ask any other questions you have.